that to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Be close enough to that mic.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Judge, we can approach real quickly before we get started on this witness. All right, thank you. Good morning, Sergeant. If you can please tell the jury your name and spell your last name for the court reporter.
Sure. It's Gregory's first name. Last name is Vanheis. That's V-A-N space capital H-E-Y-S-T.
All right, and Sergeant, where are you currently working?
I'm currently employed as a detective sergeant with the City of Tampa Police Department.
How long have you been working with the City of Tampa Police Department?
I've been there about 25 and a half years.
What is your current position or title at I know you said you're sergeant detective, but do you work in a particular area or a particular group?
I do. So my current assignment right now is the detective sergeant and supervisor of our Internet Crimes Against Children and Cybercrime Squad. Mostly investigating in Internet crimes against children. We deal with digital forensics, things like that.
Prior to your current position, what other positions have you held with the Tampa Police Department?
Sure. So prior to this role, I was the detective sergeant of the homicide unit for about 5.5 years, from maybe 2015 until 2020, or into, halfway into 2020, 2021. Prior to that, I was a detective sergeant of a district, so supervising a detective unit. Prior to that, I was a detective in a district, investigating general crimes. And then I had some various roles in undercover drug, gang unit, and patrol.
In your career with the Tampa Police Department, have you ever had opportunities to work on cases regarding cell phone technology, specifically with cellular records, mobile forensics, and cybercrime?
I have multiple.
Okay. And have you had any specific training in those areas?
I have probably starting maybe 15 years ago or so, I started kind of taking formal advanced training, both from private and public vendors, so private companies, then also some government institutions like the FBI. I've probably had well over 500 hours of training related to either cell phone technology, cyber crimes, digital forensics, topics like that.
Are you certified in any areas?
So I'm a certified wireless analyst, which has to do with just the technology of wireless communication.
Okay. What about on-the-job experience? About how many cases have you had involving cellular technology in your career? Approximately.
I would say approximately. I've probably dealt with 300 or 400, and that's probably a low estimate.
Okay. And have you ever had occasion to map out based on cell site records and to form a travel of a cell phone?
I have multiple times.
Approximately how many times would you say?
Oh, hundreds.
Okay. Explain to the jury how that's done in a typical manner.
So when I first started, so we get records from companies such as T-Mobile or Verizon or AT&T. Those are the three providers right now. What they do is they're keeping records for their customers. It started way back as they kept records so they could charge you based on your usage, or like long distance calls, or where in the world you were calling from. So they keep those records or logs of records. They would then give them to law enforcement via legal process, so via either subpoena or search warrant. We could look at those records, we could see each row of activity. It's in a spreadsheet, like an Excel spreadsheet, and it'll give a timestamp of when it occurred, the phone number involved, the device information sometimes that was involved, and then depending on the legal process, so if it's the search warrant, you'll also get some geographic information for that activity. So that could be the cell site that phone was connected to for that activity, whether it was a voice call or maybe it was a data transmission. And then also it would give you a side of that cell site, so which direction it was connecting to. And then those records have kind of have advanced since then to things such as timing advance. So they give a little more specialized location. But that's generally how that works.
All right. And have you ever testified as an expert in this area?
I have,
About approximately how many times?
I believe, 3 times in this district.
And you all in this jurisdiction? In this
Yes, sir.
district? All right. I don't know if the defense would like to ask any questions. or-
Maintain our objection, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, now before we get into the specific findings in this case, did you prepare a presentation to explain this technology with the jury?
I did, yes.
And do you believe this presentation will help them in understanding the specific findings in this particular case?
I do.
All right, Judge, at this time, I'm going to introduce Court Exhibit 1.
Maintaining our objection.
Noted, so noted.
All right, so this is, I guess, just a sort of an introductory slide, correct? Let me see
Yes,
if I
sir.
can get this, All right, now, this is slide 2. What are we looking at, and if you can explain to the jury what this is saying?
Yeah, so this is just to give an idea of generally how cell sites are set up. So you're probably familiar, you've all seen them, big towers that can be at an intersection or anywhere really, and they have those antennas. Most cell sites are 3-sided. Not all, but generally speaking, they're going to have 3 sides. Generally speaking, also, each of those 3 sides are going to cover about 120 degrees. So if you separate a cell site, each of those sectors or sides of a cell site will serve about 120 degrees of range.
All right. So what are we looking at in slide 3 here?
So here's some examples of, again, the slide before, but here's some examples of cell sites that are in the city of Tampa. On the left side of the slide is more of a traditional cell site that has those antennas on the top, 3 sides. There's also some non-traditional cell sites that are becoming more common. They can be on top of a telephone pole. They could be attached to a building. And now we're starting to see them pop up, especially here in downtown Tampa, sites that are almost look like a telephone pole, but they're about the height of a telephone pole, but that is the cell site now, and they're covering a smaller area.
Okay. All right, what are we seeing here in slide number 4?
So this is just to note that when we deal with cell site activity, the records we get from a company like T-Mobile, they'll give us the cell site that the phone is connected to. At times they'll give us the sector or the direction the antenna it was connected to. When you look at a demonstrative, when we map these things out, we notate that where the cell phone was, the cell site was located, which is going to be where those 2 lines are connected. That's the cell site location. And the shaded area is the directionality, so what side of that cell site. It in no way means that it was limited to where those lines are depicted on the graph or on the map, or the shaded area does not mean that's the area of coverage. It's just intended to give a location of the cell site and the directionality.
So the cell phone could be anywhere kind of within that, like, that V section.
Generally speaking, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, and slide number 4, what are we looking at here?
So this is a record that, a timing advance record. So it's has to do with activity on a cell phone or registrations that phone is connecting back and forth to a cell site. Timing advance is the cell phone's company of basically determining how can I serve that cell phone properly? How can I make sure their calls go through, their texts go through, their Facebook posts, all their data transmissions, things like that. So they come with technology that basically it knows generally where that phone is and it wants to know, so it's sending messages back and forth. Those logs or those messages at registrations are getting captured in these logs. They're providing an estimated distance from the cell site along with an estimated location of the device. The cell phone companies say that these are estimations, that they're not exact pinpoints of we know exactly where that device was. But again, it gives estimations. Here you're seeing, and this will be later shown on the some further slides, that shaded area is the directionality. So that's the antenna that the cell phone was connected to, the cell site, the antenna, the directionality. And then that arc that's connected the 2 straight lines, that's what T-Mobile is saying. That's the estimated distance that handset or that cell phone was from that cell site.
All right. So it doesn't give an exact location ever for where these cell phones are, just kind of estimates. Is that right?
They're estimated locations, yes, sir.
Okay. So now, at this point, we are getting into some more specifics with regards to this case. So what are we looking at in slide number 6?
So this is a copy of the subscriber information that T-Mobile provided for phone number 813-447-6234. It gives a name, an address, some dates of service. It also gives some phone information, some identifiers, things of that nature.
All right. And were you given this information by Detective Vanheis as far as the phone information?
But Detective Wieland, yes.
I'm
I
sorry,
was.
Detective Vanheis, that's
Yeah.
you. Yeah, Detective Whelan, I apologize.
Yes.
So you were given this information, and so do you know the significance of this particular phone number?
Yeah, it was conveyed to me, yes.
Okay, what were you told?
Objection to hearsay.
Well, all right, I'll rephrase that question. So you were told that this was a phone number related to this case, or that's how you put it in there?
Correct.
All right. So 6 gives an information of an individual by the name of Daniel Tollerud. Do you know who that is?
I do not.
Okay. Now going further to slide 7, what are we looking at there with regards to the same phone number that we were talking about in slide 6?
It's just kind of some information that you can glean from the subscriber records, just showing that that phone number was being used by a Motorola. It gives the model number there. I apologize, I can't read it exactly, but a Motorola smartphone which was the device being used with that phone number for the records that we have.
And so this is information you all received from the records you order from T-Mobile.
Correct.
In slide 8, what are we looking at here?
So again, this is just subscriber information for a phone number of 305-910-9779, providing similar information as I stated below, a name, an address of the subscriber, some dates of service, and then information about the device itself.
All right, and on this subscriber number 305, who does it say the owner is?
The listed subscriber name is Erica Sweet.
And again, in slide 9, this is kind of similar to what we did in slide 7, where you kind of talk about the phone.
Yes, sir. It's just showing that that number was being used, in this case, with a Samsung smartphone.
All right, and what is slide 10?
So here's an example of the T-Mobile timing advanced data. So what I mentioned before, this is the, and I apologize for the slide, these rows actually go all the way across. I've cut it in half. But this is the type of data that you would get on a timing advanced record from T-Mobile pursuant to a search warrant.
Slide 11, what do we see here?
So this is plotted activity from those timing advanced records for the phone number ending in 6234. So you have some locations that were conveyed to me that are significant to the case by Detective Wieland that have been plotted out. And then the black lines, so where the two straight lines, black lines meet, that's going to be the location of a cell site where that activity occurred from. The shaded areas, as I mentioned before, that's signifying which antenna or the directionality that cell phone connected with. So basically pointing out from that shaded area. Now, the arced lines, those are the estimated distances from those cell sites extending from those two straight lines. This is for activity between on May 6, 2022, between 2:50 a.m. and 2:55 a.m.
And that's for the phone number of 447-6234?
Yes, sir.
All right. And the phone that's for a period of 5 minutes, correct?
Yes.
So it does ping off, I guess, different towers. What happens there? How does that work?
Yeah, so the way timing advanced records work, they're occurring very often and frequently. And often they'll connect with different cell sites that are serving the area a cell site is in. A lot of times that's how we can really narrow down an area where we think that cell phone was, or potentially if we're looking for a device where that cell phone is. And they can have distances, and a lot of times if those estimated distances overlap, or you have multiple distances, it gives a very good indication of where that cell phone was or an estimated location.
Okay. And slide number 12.
So this is timing advance activity for the same period, so May 6, 2022, between 2:50 a.m. and 2:55 a.m. For the phone number ending in 9779. Again, some timing advance activity here. You can see some activity with two different cell sites, with one of them providing that estimated distance that's kind of crossing over some areas there in the middle of the screen.
All right. And slide 13.
So this is moving forward to activity on May 6, 2022, between 3:05 a.m. and 3:10 a.m. For the phone number ending in 6234. Here, there's a lot more activity, and in my training and conversations with other people who are versed in these topics, it seems that timing advance records seem to produce more activity when there's more movement on a device, and that's why you may see that here. So all of those arced lines, those are all estimated distances from the cell site. And then you'll also see those little black dots. Those are T-Mobile's estimated location for that device. Again, they say estimated, but again, this is just 5 minutes of activity for that device, showing a lot of distances kind of congregating where those black dots are.
And that's kind of in the same general area as the homicide location. Would that be accurate?
It is almost, I guess, directly over, and a lot of the overlapping arcs seem to be right, probably within blocks of that area.
Okay. And this is the 447-6234 phone, which if we refer back to on slide number 11 at 2:50, so about 10, 15 minutes earlier, was in a completely different location of the city. Would that be accurate?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay. And that's kind of, would that indicate sort of in the area where the victim was picked up at 2:52 hours?
Yes, sir.
All right. And does the data correspond with that location, that the cell phone is in that area?
Yes, it does.
And then with the phone number 305-910-9779, tell me about this slide number 14.
So this is also for the same date, May 6, 2022, for that time period between 03:05 a.m. to 3:10 a.m. for the phone number ending in 9779. It's showing very similar activity as the previous slide, the other number we're speaking about, with a lot of estimated distances that are at or near the area of the homicide location. It's unfortunately, it's also red, but it's connected to that red line with homicide location. That's the plot of the homicide location that was provided to me. So you'll see a lot of the red dots of estimated locations for the cell phone itself, and then those arcs, which are estimated distances from the cell site, which are several are overlapping in that area.
So based on this data, would you say it's consistent with that cell phone 305-910-9779 being in the area around the homicide location?
Yes.
And slide number 15, what are we looking at on this particular slide?
So this is for activity for the phone number ending in 6234, now from 3:30 a.m. to 3:34 a.m. The map has also been magnified out, so you're getting a larger view of the city or the area, because the phone is now showing activity up on the, I guess it's the left side of the screen, up near a plot called Thornton's, which is a gas station at Armenia and Hillsborough. So it's showing the device was connected to a cell site just a few blocks actually away from that gas station, and those estimated distances seem to be crossing over or nearby the gas station, along with some estimated locations of that device nearby also.
And Detective, was that part of what drew this investigation to that Thornton's, this evidence that came out of this?
Yes.
And then finally, slide number 16, what do we see here?
So this is activity for the phone number ending in 9779 for the same time period, May 6, 2022, between 3:30 and 3:34 a.m., showing the timing advance activity or the records where that phone is also associated with a cell site located very near to the Thorntons there, with estimated distances crossing over or nearby the Thorntons, along with estimated device locations in that area.
So Detective, based on your looking at these records, would it appear to you that the phones were in the same general location around the same time?
Yes.
And Judge, I'm now going to provide this to the clerk as states court or as court exhibit number 1.
All right.
Now, when you download these sites into a map format, is there a way to show the sites, the phone moves, the movement of the phone?
There is. So there's a tool we can use. There's several tools. The one I use will let you input those Excel spreadsheets. So the data that we get from a company like T-Mobile, it'll plot these out on a map, show the directionality, but then also you can play the movement. Basically, you can create an animation showing the movement of the device associated with the cell sites, and you can speed it up too. So for example, a minute of activity on the records, we can show it in 5 seconds on the animation.
And did you create, for purpose of this case, 4 different animations showing the movement of these phones?
I did, yes.
All right. I'm going to show you, and I'm showing you what's been marked as States Exhibit 18A, B, C, and D.
Okay.
Are those the ones you created in this case?
Yes.
And do they fairly and accurately depict the movement of those cell phones according to the cell site data you received?
Yes.
Judge, at this point, we would move to have States Exhibit 18A through D admitted into evidence.
Maintain our objections, Your Honor.
Same rule, it will be admitted as 18A through D for the state.
All right. I'm going to start with 18A. This is indicated on the CD as 0250 to 0340 for 305-910-9719. Is this the one you created?
Yes.
All right. Has it been published now?
Okay.
All right, Detective, we put that. Now, there are times where there's nothing on the map. What happens there?
So there's just not activity occurring on the records.
Oh, let me stop it now. Okay, and occasionally we see what appears to be a cell site tower that's located in a completely different location from where it's pinging just a minute before. How is that possible?
So there could be different explanations. Cell phones operate on radio waves, so sometimes in dense urban areas, you're going to have, I believe, what's called reflections, or if a signal is bouncing off of multiple buildings, it could bounce and then give over to a cell site that's not near the area where the device is. There's times also, too, where a phone, T-Mobile uses what's called a distributed antenna system, or a DAS system. They have big base stations. There's one located, and I think that's actually some of the activity that we see on that map there, located area of 40th and Hillsborough. It's connected via fiber underground to smaller cell sites. I think we saw one earlier, like on the top of a telephone pole. At times, the timing advanced records have not been updated or show the connection with the smaller cell site and are still reverting back to that base station. There's a couple different explanations that could be why that occurred.
Okay. But overall, that map fairly and accurately depicts kind of the movement of the phone during the course of that time period that you've documented.
Yes.
I'm going to publish now State's Exhibit 18B. And this is related to the cell phone 813-447-6234, correct?
Yes.
Now, do you also have the ability to overlay the two telephone numbers together in one continuous map?
Yes, you can combine the sets of records to show the movement at the same time.
And do you delineate them or separate them by different color of their cell site maps?
Yes.
Okay. And so, for instance, so what we've seen so far is the 305-910-9779 appears to be in red, and the 813-447-6234 appears to be in black. Is that true?
That's correct.
All right. And did you do that in State's Exhibit 18C?
Yes.
I'm now publishing State's Exhibit number 18C. And they are synced up time-wise. Would that be accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. So, Detective, I think it's pretty clear, but just so, based on your understanding and expertise as far as in this area, do those phones appear to be traveling in concert?
They do, yes.
Now, were you given information in this case that the cell phone belonging to 813-447-6234 moved the next day?
Yes,
All right. And did you, in fact, map out the coordinates of that movement of that phone?
I did.
And as a result of that, did that assist in the investigation in this case, in fact, locating the individual who was involved in this case?
Yes.
All right, I'm now publishing State's Exhibit 18D. And this is the following day, correct? Or the same day, I guess, just later in the afternoon?
The same day, later in the morning and afternoon, in the afternoon, yes.
Yes, okay. At 3 o'clock to 3:40 p.m., correct?
That's correct, 3 p.m. to 3:40 p.m.
At 3 to 3:40. Right. And that phone appears, based on this mapping, to be around Tampa General Hospital for quite some period.
Yes, sir.
All right, and is that ultimately what led this cell site activity led investigators to Tampa General Hospital?
Yes.
Detective, as far as the rest of the investigation, was this basically your sole involvement in this investigation?
Yes, sir.
All right, Judge, I'll pass the witness.
Hey, good morning, Sergeant.
Good morning.
Just a few questions for you. You started off by talking to us about your role at the Tampa Police Department in the Internet Crimes Against Children section, correct?
Correct.
To be perfectly clear, this case did not come to you as part of the Internet Crimes Against Children.
That is exactly correct, yes.
This is a situation where homicide detectives requested your assistance because you have the knowledge and skills to map out the phone information.
That's correct.
Okay. And in fact, you don't begin to do that mapping or reviewing of the records until sometime, I believe, is it in April of 2025?
As far as this detailed, yes.
Right, okay. Now, there's a difference between, I'm hoping I'm getting the terminology correctly, between simple cell site data and timing advance data, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Cell site data essentially just tells you which cell phone tower the phone is connecting to
Yes, although
and the
time.
direction.
Right, and timing advance is cell site data because it's connections between the handset and a cell site.
Right. Timing advanced attempts to pinpoint within a certain proximity the exact location of the, and when I say exact, I mean within a margin of error, the location of a handheld device.
Estimated location of the device along with the estimated distance from the cell site. Yes, ma'am.
From the cell site, right. To do this, different cell phone providers use different formulas to reach whatever distance they believe the device might be, correct?
Proprietary algorithms, yes.
And what that means, proprietary algorithms, is that you're not privy to that information, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so you don't know how T-Mobile is reaching the information that they have.
No.
When we're talking about calculations such as timing advance, different factors can come into play, such as weather, correct?
It could, yes.
Whether or not you're in an area with tall trees, correct?
Tall trees are just structures in general.
Tall
I think
buildings.
trees maybe not as much, but metal buildings, things that could affect the radio signal, it's probably more accurate.
If you're in an area that is heavily wooded or has a lot of tall trees around, can that have an effect on the formula as well?
I don't know about tall trees. My training experience is mostly talks about buildings or structures. Yeah.
In providing timing advance records to you, they come to you, the person does not have to physically be using the phone in order for you to get information from timing advance, correct?
Correct.
And that's because the phone is routinely trying to connect to towers for a various number of reasons.
Correct.
So when we see, for example, that 6234 phone number that's associated with the victim in the case connecting after we know she's dead, that does not mean someone's using her phone, right?
That's correct.
It just means that her phone is still on and is still actively searching for a signal.
The device is, right, registering with the cell sites that are serving that handset.
Okay, all right. And when timing advance records are provided to you in times, are they provided to you in standard Eastern time, like the time that we're seeing today?
They're not. They come in UTC, Coordinated Universal Time, which has to be adjusted. I believe at that point it was 4-hour adjustment to Eastern Standard Time.
And so what you have to do is that 4 hours ahead or 4 hours behind?
4 hours ahead is UTC, so we have to subtract.
And does that change whether it's 4 hours or 5 hours depending on whether we're in daylight savings time or not?
Yes.
Okay. At this time, back in May of 2022, this would have been the 4 hour ahead.
Correct.
Okay. So when you first get the records, and you're probably using a software system or something to do this for you, but it has to basically calculate the time by subtracting 4 hours from what's on the record.
That's right.
Got it. Okay. And that's pretty universal. Most cell phone provider companies will provide phone numbers or phone records to you in that manner.
In UTC time, or
time.
yes, yes.
The timing advance records, those are, in addition to the information, you're provided with a confidence interval, correct?
They do, yes.
And that can range from high to low, and I think, is there like a medium or intermediate?
I think it's low, medium, high, or it's 3
Okay.
levels, something like that, yes.
3 levels, okay.
Yeah.
And to prepare your demonstratives that we've seen here today, you used all 3 confidence intervals, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You were only given location data for those 2 phones that we saw here today, correct?
Correct.
And for the records, that's going to be an 813 number ending in 6234, correct?
Yes.
And then a 305 number ending in 9779, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Can I have a moment, please, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
Nothing else. Thank you, Sergeant.
Can you read it?
No, Your Honor.
May I just witness be excused?
Yes, you may.
Yes, no objection.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Call your next witness.
Okay, the next one's a bit longer, it's great. Then we need to take a break real quick.
Only figure.
Oh, sorry.
Just real quick. Logistics.
Do you swear to affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you, ma'am.
Do we need a approach real quick? Spell your last name for the court reporter.
Yes, my name is Dr. Ashley Perkins, Perkins.
All right, and doctor, how are you currently employed?
I'm an associate medical examiner with the Hillsborough County Medical Examiner's Office.
How long have you been working with the medical examiner's office?
I've been full-time with the medical examiner's office for 5 years now.
All right. Prior to working with the Hillsborough County Medical Examiner's Office, did you have any other employment?
No.
All right. What sort of, so what is your degree?
So I actually have a bachelor's of science in biology from the University of Missouri, a master's of biomedical science from Midwestern University, an doctor of osteopathic medicine from the Arizona College of Osteopathic Medicine, so that's medical school. And then I've also completed training in anatomic and clinical pathology for residency at the University of South Florida, and I'm board certified in both anatomic and clinical pathology, and then oh, I'm so sorry. And then I have a forensic pathology training, which was also completed here at the University of South Florida with the conjunction of the Hillsborough County Medical Examiner's Office.
About how many years of education have you had in order to become an associate medical examiner?
About 10, 12 years.
Okay. And you're certified in what areas? I'm sorry, because you were saying that quick. I want to make sure she got
My
that.
apologies. Anatomic and clinical pathology, as well as forensic pathology.
All right. And what is your position now with the medical examiner's office?
Associate medical examiner.
All right. As an associate medical examiner, what are your general duties?
So on any death in the state of Florida that's in the Hillsborough County jurisdiction that falls under the statute 40611, meaning any death that's not under the care of a physician, a Florida certified physician, or that's would be a sudden unexpected death. So children, infants, things like that, or accidents, suicides, homicides, something that would be deemed not natural death would come to the medical examiner's office. And it's our duty to determine cause and manner of death.
All right. And what does that mean, cause and manner of death?
So cause of death is an injury or disease that initiates a chain of events leading to someone's death. Manner of death is descriptors of how the situation occurred that led to someone's death. So I mentioned something like homicide, which would be something death at the hands of another individual. Suicide, meaning a death at one's own hands. Accidents, so unforeseen events that led to a death. Natural, things like pneumonia, heart disease, those kind of things. And then there's a fifth called undetermined, where sometimes the circumstances of the death just cannot be determined by the investigation at that time.
All right. Have you ever had to testify as a court or in court as an expert before?
Yes,
About approximately how many times?
at least 50.
50? Okay. At this time, Judge, I'll pass the witness if you have any questions.
No questions on this one.
Now, as a medical examiner, do you sometimes go to the scenes of crimes?
Yes.
Did you go to the scene of this crime?
No, I did not.
All right. Does the office or does the medical examiner's office send someone out, though, typically?
Yes, we have certified death investigators who are specialized in going to crime scenes and collecting that kind of evidence specifically just for the medical examiner's purpose in determining cause and manner of death.
Right. And prior to the autopsy, are you informed by that examiner or by that person who goes out there what the circumstances surrounding the location and how the person was found? Are you given all that information prior to doing the autopsy?
Yes.
And does that information aid you and assist you in determining the cause of death?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe to the jury how a typical autopsy is performed?
Sure. So it's the minute the person comes into our facility, they are issued a unique case number. So that case number is going to follow them wherever they go within our morgue so that we can document purposes with photography and making sure everything matches and we have a good chain of evidence with that individual. So especially in a homicide, when they come from the scene to our facility, the body bag actually has a red tag on it in order to determine that it was consistent with coming from the scene into our facility. And then I'm present at that time when our morgue technicians will process the body. So that's collecting evidence that's on the body, that's fingerprints, fingernail clippings, hair clippings, photography, and x-rays of the individual. Then I do an external examination And that's where I'm documenting hair color, eye color, identifying factors, along with things like injuries that I need to document and any evidence that I might see visually on the body. Then the body is cleaned so that I can even further look, make sure there's no injuries hiding underneath clotted blood or any debris, maybe dirt that might be under any wounds. And then that proceeds into the internal examination. And that's what the traditional autopsy that we think of. So opening up the body, looking at wound paths, looking at the organs and checking for any injuries or natural disease. And we're collecting toxicology specimens at that time. That's blood and urine, those kind of things that we may need to process in the laboratory. The organs are then taken from the body, and I'm looking at them visually again with the naked eye and taking sometimes, depending on the case, small sections to look underneath the microscope for any kind of natural disease that I can't see with the naked eye. At that time, that's the end of the autopsy, and throughout that whole process, photographs are being taken, and again, with that unique case number.
All right. And you mentioned fingernail clippings. Those are given usually to law enforcement at that time?
Yes, we collect the evidence, and then at the end of the autopsy, the evidence is packaged and given to law enforcement for their processing.
Okay. Is one of the things that you collect a blood stain card?
Yes.
And how do you collect that, and what is that for?
So while I'm in that internal portion of the autopsy, I am taking blood samples directly from a blood vessel, and then that blood is then put into a syringe and placed on a blood card. And then that blood card is used for the purposes of DNA testing that may be done.
All right. And I'm showing you what's been marked at State's Exhibit 20 and ask you if you can take a look inside. Yeah.
Yes. Should put two gloves on, I'm sorry.
They kind of,
Stick together. Yes. So this is my signature, yes.
do you recognize this?
Yes.
And what is this?
This is the blood spot card. So again, taking the blood specimen from directly inside the body and placing it onto a card and allowing it to dry for DNA purposes.
All right, and that's pretty common in any case, or especially cases involving that could be a
Every
potential
case we
homicide.
do, homicide or not, is done.
Every case, okay. Judge, at this time I move to have State's Exhibit 20 admitted into evidence.
I have no objection.
State's 20 will be admitted.
Do you also obtain the height and weight of the individual that you are about to conduct an autopsy on?
Yes.
And in this particular case of Nilexia Alexander, which I guess I should ask first, were you involved in the autopsy of Nilexia Alexander?
I was.
All right. Did you obtain a height and weight for Nilexia Alexander?
Yes.
What was that?
I'm referring to my autopsy report, page 3. She was 5 foot 9 inches, 180 pounds.
All right. And you mentioned that pictures are taken, is that correct?
Correct.
Hold on. I'm trying to find. Can't get it up. Oh, there you go.
Okay.
See, only you can figure that out. There we go. All right. Doctor, you mentioned that in performing autopsies, you also take photographs as you're going through to document the injuries and the locations of the injuries. Is that pretty common?
Yes.
All right. And would those pictures aid and assist you in demonstrating to the jury the injuries that Nilexia Alexander suffered in this case?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibits D2 through D27 and ask if you can take a look through those photographs. right, Doctor, have you had a chance to look at those?
I have.
And do those pictures fairly and accurately depict the autopsy and the pictures that you took when you were conducting that autopsy on that day?
They do.
All right, move down State's Exhibit D2 through D27, admitted into evidence.
Maintain your objection, Your Honor.
Objection noted, same ruling will be allowed to states D2 through 27.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I'm going to show you now what's marked as States D2. Now, you had mentioned that when they're brought in with a unique identification number. Is that identified in this case?
Yes, it is.
And can you point that out to the jury so that they can see that?
Yes. Is it all right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we're looking at the case number here.
So that 22-04281 that's depicted on this picture, that's the case number?
Yes.
And it's marked underneath there, unidentified. At this point in time, did you know the individual's name is Nilexia Alexander?
No, we did not have a name for her at that time.
All right. And is this kind of a typical picture to take to show the facial characteristics of the individual who you're about to conduct the autopsy on?
Yes, we do an identification photo so that we can show family potentially if identification is needed visually.
Okay. Now, it shows on this photo, it appears that one of her eyes on the right side is swollen to some degree and black. What is that from? Is that what she hit there, or is that from something different?
So as we'll see further, there are gunshot wounds to her head, and they created fractures on the inside of her skull, and that allows blood to get underneath the skin and can collect around the eye, giving this bruised eye, black eye look.
All right. Thank you. Now, before I get into the rest of the pictures, Doctor, if you can please maybe briefly kind of describe what these injuries were that you noted on Nilexia Alexander when she came in.
Sure. So she had 4 total gunshot wounds to her body. All were entrances and exits, so 4 pairs of wounds, 4 gunshot wounds, as well as 2 bruises, 1 to her left arm, 1 to her right forearm, and some small healing abrasions on one of her ankles.
All right. Now I'm going to start going through those, and Doctor, before I get into the specific injuries, and are you able to calculate or determine just based on those injuries the timing of those injuries?
No, I cannot.
All right. All right. I'm going to start with states D3. Do we see a particular injury in this particular case?
Yes.
All right. And where is this injury?
So we're looking at her back, at the base of her neck.
Okay. And there's a marker underneath. Is that notating a specific injury?
The marker, the ruler with our case number, is providing some scale for noting the injury, which is just above the scale, above the number 3.
All right. Can you describe this wound to the jury?
So this would be an entrance gunshot wound to the back.
All right. Where did this wound travel? What was the travel of the wound?
So this went from the left side of her back to the right side of her back. Again, this is what we call a perforating wound, or an through and through wound.
So no projectile was recovered from this?
Correct.
All right. So, and can you give the general direction of travel? You said what goes through the back?
Yes, I am going to refer to the case report on page 8 of the report. So this is going to travel, and this is with reference to her standing in standard anatomic position. What that means, and Your Honor, if I may stand. So the person is looking directly at you with their arms at their side and their palms facing forward. So there's a lot of movement with arms, so we do what we call standard anatomic position so that everyone speaks the same language. So arms at the side and palms forward. And this is based on how the wound path went through her, so her lefts and rights. So in this case, the wound went from her left to right, front to back, and downward.
All right. And I'm going to show you what's marked as State's Exhibit D1. Would this be an example of the standard anatomical position as drawn out?
Yes.
And does this, was this in fact your diagram that you used to show the wounds?
Yes, these are my notes from the autopsy.
And it fairly accurately shows what you did.
Yes.
Judge, move down State's Exhibit D1, admitted into evidence.
No objection to D1.
D1 will be admitted without objection.
So when you're talking about the standard anatomical position, as you demonstrated, this is kind of a diagram that you will use in these kind of cases.
Yes.
Right? And the injury you're referring to that we're talking about right now, this is the injury that you said occurs right here, correct?
Correct.
Where my finger's pointing, which is sort of the up on the back, with the back portion towards the left side just below the head.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay. And you said it enters there and then it exits. Would this be the exit wound consistent with that?
Yes.
Right, and in D4, does this give a more close-up view of that particular entrance wound?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And then D5, what are we looking at here?
So this is the corresponding exit wound to the entrance wound we just saw in the back. So now we're more on the right side of the back, close to the shoulder.
And how are you able to determine which is an entrance wound and which is an exit wound?
So entrance wounds and exit wounds kind of have unique features as the bullet goes through the body. So with entrance wounds, we typically see what we call a ring of abrasion around the hole that's made in the skin, as well as what we call a tissue deficit. So like a hole punch through the skin. I can't put the margins of that wound back together. Exit wounds, however, I can typically fold the tissue back together. If I were to do it like a puzzle piece, it would go back together.
Okay. So in D4, do we see some of what you're talking about, the abrasion or anything like that?
Yes.
You can stand up, that's fine.
So this red pink area here, where the skin is missing, that's the abrasion here. So a scrape, like you had, if you fell on your knees on the pavement and you had to scrape the skin, that's what we're talking about there.
All right, and then the exit wound doesn't have that, correct?
Correct. In this case, if you were to fold the tissue edges together, they would come back together.
So in D6, which is a more close-up of that exit wound, you can kind of see how you do it there?
Yes.
Okay. Doctor, was this a fatal injury?
It was not.
Would this injury have been immediately incapacitating?
No.
Could a person who suffered this injury still be able to walk around and move around?
Yes.
If an individual was seated in a vehicle and suffered this injury, could that person open the car door and still get out of the car?
Yes.
Now, the angle of that, you don't know the position of the body at the time of shooting, correct?
Correct.
And so her position could have been in any manner or any way when that shot occurred.
Yes, there are a variety of positions she could have been in.
Okay. I'm going to ask you, doctor, so if she were seated in a vehicle and sees someone about to shoot her and bends down like that, would that be consistent with the shot and the angle of the shot?
Yes.
All right. What was, now, another one you talk about, let me go to State's Exhibit D7. What are we looking at here?
So this is an entrance gunshot wound on the left side of her head.
Okay. Describe, if you can, for the jury, what this wound, what happened to it.
Yes, so this entrance wound is on the left side of her head and enters into her scalp and then into her skull and brain. Specifically, I'm referring to page 5 of my report. Enters the left parietal hair-bearing region of her scalp and then the left parietal bone, so the side of her head here. Enters the parietal lobes of the brain, the left and the right, and then exits out the right parietal bone on the side of her scalp, and that's where it exits.
Okay. And so in State's Exhibit D8, is that just a more close-up view of that wound?
Yes, and again, we can see that red area of marginal abrasion a little bit better on this one.
Okay. So that definitely indicates that it's an entrance wound, is that right?
Correct.
Was there any evidence of close-range firing on this?
No.
Tell the jury, if you could, what close-range firing, what sort of evidence you look for in that.
Sure. So sometimes if the muzzle of the weapon is close enough to the body, then we get what we call evidence of close-range firing. So other than the bullet being ejected from the end of that muzzle, the unburnt gunpowder will actually eject from the end of the muzzle as well, and then some soot, so that like light gunpowder, but burnt. So if you are close enough to an individual when they are shot, the unspent gunpowder hits the body very hard and create these little punctate abrasions on the skin. And if it's even closer to the person, then the very light soot actually can hit the skin as well. So we'll see soot and gunpowder stippling on the skin. In this case, I see neither.
Okay. Now, she had how would you describe her hair?
She had very thick, full hair.
All right. Could that have maybe absorbed some of that so that you would not be able to see it in this particular case?
That's possible. Any intervening object, whether it be clothes, thick hair, hats, things like that, those can block the evidence. Close range firing doesn't mean it's not close in firing distance. It just means it doesn't leave that evidence of it.
All right. And you indicated that this wound that we were referring to in D7 has an exit wound on the other side of the body. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. And it's on the other side of the head. Would D9, is that the corresponding exit wound to that particular shot?
With reference in this photograph above the ruler, so to the left in the photograph, yes, that is the
Right here?
corresponding exit wound. Correct.
That is the corresponding exit wound. All right. And so was this wound immediately fatal?
This would be very quickly fatal, yes.
Very quickly fatal. So, like, if she had suffered this wound and she was on an operating table, they probably still would not be able to, she probably would not survive.
Correct.
Was this wound immediately incapacitating?
Yes.
So, once suffering this wound, she would have just collapsed immediately, correct?
Yes.
All right. And in D10, this is just an example showing that how this is an exit wound, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you described that wound. What was the directionality of that, or the path of travel of that wound?
So again, referring to page 5 of my report, the direction, again, in standard anatomic position for her would be left to right, slightly back to front, and upward.
Okay. And on State's Exhibit D1 on this chart, where is that particular wound demonstrated on here?
So underneath the L here, this is the entrance wound, so this is her left, and then it travels to the right, and then right underneath the R is the corresponding exit wound.
All right. So it almost travels directly across her head.
Correct.
Okay. Now, Doctor, I may need some help with some of these other photographs that show these wounds, but as far as the entrance and exits, but I will start, let me start with one that I'm pretty certain is, I'm going to show you what's marked as State's Exhibit D11. What are we looking at in this particular instance?
So we are looking at an entrance gunshot wound on the right side of her face. This wound has those characteristics of the close range firing I was talking about. The gunpowder stippling, so that's the tiny little red marks on her face. That's created from the unspent gunpowder, the unburnt gunpowder. And then there's a very fine gray mist to that. That's the soot.
So, Doctor, based on that, would you say that this was a close range firing?
Yes.
Approximately how far a distance do you think the muzzle was from the face when she was shot here?
Sure. So you'd actually have to fire that exact same weapon with that same projectile to get the precise distance fire. But generally speaking, with handguns, soot only travels about 12 inches, up to 12 inches. And the gunpowder stippling, that can be a little bit farther, but since we have the soot here, it narrows that frame of distance down to around 12 inches.
So, Doctor, would your opinion be that the muzzle or the gun was within 12 inches of her face at this point?
Yes.
All right. And States D12, does that also give you a more, can you help with the description of the actual soot and stippling?
Yes. So now this is a closer picture of what we can see, and I'm not sure if it's projecting very well for you, but there's a gray haze in and around some of these punctate abrasions. So this is the gunpowder stippling, the small punctate holes, and then the gray haze to it is the soot.
Now, did this wound have a corresponding exit wound?
It did.
Okay, so this was a, as you said, perforating. They all were, correct?
Yes, all 4 wounds were perforating.
All right. Where did this wound exit?
So the corresponding exit wound is on the back of her neck.
All right, I'm going to go to States D16. Does this demonstrate where that exit wound is?
Yes, the back of her neck, around that hairline, yes.
Would it, so it appears there may be 2 in this particular instance. Which one were you referring to?
We are looking at the wound just above the ruler.
Right, this one right here where my finger is pointing? which is
Correct.
just above the ruler as you described?
Yes.
And that's the one that came, so describe to the jury then that cheek wound, where the path of travel was in relation to her head.
Sure. It's going inside the right side of her face, entering through some facial bones, and then hits the very tip of her jawbone here. Enters through the back of the neck, hitting the vertebral artery, which is an important artery sending blood from heart up into the brain, and then exits out the back side of her neck at the hairline.
Okay, so if the muzzle then would most likely be in front of her face, so she would actually be able to view it.
Yes.
All right. Was this a fatal wound?
Yes.
Would it have been immediately fatal?
Yes.
And would it have been immediately incapacitating?
Yes.
And states D17, is that just a more close-up view of that exit wound that we've just discussed?
It is.
Was there another, so we've talked about two, we've talked about the one to the left forehead, and we talked about the one to the cheek. Was there another one?
There was a third one on the left side of the head, but just a little farther back of the head.
Okay, so I'm going to show you states D13. Is this in fact the entrance wound you're referring to?
Yes, it is.
All right. And describe for the jury this wound, its path of travel, where it entered, and kind of how it went through her body.
Sure. So I'm going to refer to my report starting on page 5. This is Roman numeral 2 within the report. So this entrance wound, like I said, is a little bit further back, but still on the left side of the head. Enters through the scalp, enters the skull, perforates the left parietal and right occipital lobes of the brain, the right cerebellar hemisphere. So this one's starting to go in a downward trajectory, so hitting brain, and then the cerebellum sits a little bit lower and hits at the right side of the occipital bone, so the back of your head, just before you're getting to the neck region, and that's where it exits the head.
Okay. And so this was, again, a perforating wound.
Yes.
All right, and I'm going to show you, before, obviously in this photograph here in states D13, the head appears to be, the hair was shaved off, correct?
Yes.
Prior to shaving the hair, do you inspect the hair to see if there's any objects, anything of evidentiary value that you might find on the hair?
Yes.
Did you find something in this particular case?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I'm showing you what's marked as States Exhibit D14. Do we see what you identified as potential evidence in this case?
Yes, so adjacent to the exit wound within her hair, there was a small fragment of projectile. We can see it in the photograph above the 1.5 mark on the centimeters here.
All right, thank you. Now, going back to this wound, entrance wound D13, you said it had a corresponding exit wound. I'm going to show you what's marked as D15. Is this in fact the exit wound to that particular injury?
Yes, it is.
All right. And again, this is, for the photograph, it's above the ruler and kind of in the top or upper part of her neck, right?
In the back of the head, yes.
Back of the head, yes. Okay. And again, this wound was immediately fatal, or was it?
Yes.
Okay. And would this wound have been immediately incapacitating?
Yes.
Could the 3 wounds to the head, were they all fatal wounds?
Yes, they were.
Okay. And were they all basically immediately incapacitating?
Yes, they were.
So the only wound that she could have actually survived and walked around and so forth was the one to her back?
Correct.
All right. Do you sometimes make note of identifying features in a person, especially for those that are come in that are unidentified?
Yes.
All right, I'm showing you what's marked as States Exhibit D19. This is in fact an example of one of those situations?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and so this was a tattoo, correct?
Yes.
All right, and the reason for taking these pictures is also, besides just documenting the body and how you found it, but you can also use this later for identification?
Yes.
All right. Now, aside from these 4 gunshot wounds she had, you did indicate that you found some other injuries?
Yes.
What were those injuries?
So this is page 8 of the report. So there were blunt impact wounds. So those are things like bruises, scratches, what we call abrasions, lacerations or cuts in the skin. In this case, she had 2 bruises, one on the right forearm, as we just actually saw in that photo with the tattoo. There was a small contusion or bruising above the R in the tattoo. The circular discoloration here as a bruise. She also had a faint green, purple contusion or bruise to the left arm. And then she had some healing abrasions or scratches on her left ankle.
All right, in D20, would this be the other bruising you're referring to?
Yes.
In the other arm? And the abrasions you're referring to, D18, is that kind of documenting that?
Yes.
All right, and those were healing though, correct?
Those are starting to heal, yes.
Yes, all right. So you don't know whether or not those, you can't say whether or not those are related at all to what happened at that time?
No, I cannot.
All right. Now, when you obtained these, was there any other fragments aside from the one we just talked about that was in the hair? Did you find another fragment as well?
There was an additional fragment
And-
along one of the wound paths.
Where was that? It was along the wound path?
So the one we saw was associated, this one was in her hair as well. Both were kind of in and around those exit wounds and within the hair.
Okay. And what is done when you obtain those fragments? What do you do with them?
They're photographed as is, then removed from the hair, again photographed, and then placed in sealed evidence envelopes. And then I seal them with evidence tape, and then I sign over that to make sure that there's no contamination there. And then that is given into police custody for them to do all of their testing.
Okay, so like for instance, D21, would this be those things that you sealed up?
Yes.
All right. And then D22, that's the backside of that?
Yes.
All right. And you in fact put them in there yourself? Or have
I
a-
collected them, and then I gave them to my technician for them to photograph and seal.
All right. And in D23, what are we looking at here?
That is one of the fragments removed from the hair.
All right. And then D24, is that basically the same fragment just turned around?
Yes, we take multiple sides of the fragment.
Then D25, is that the other fragment that you were talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And then those are turned over to law enforcement and to do whatever they can do or want to do.
Correct.
Do you also take X-rays of the bodies before you start the autopsy or when you're doing the autopsy?
Yes, before starting any of the autopsy, and then potentially with it during the autopsy as well.
Okay. And do you use those sometimes to help you locate particular fragments or anything like that?
Yes.
And in D26, is this an example of that X-ray that was done in this particular case?
Yes.
Okay. And then D27, this is, would this be her skull?
Yes, we're looking at a side profile of her skull.
Okay. And so if there had been any fragments within her skull, would this have shown through this X-ray?
Yes.
And based on this X-ray, does it show that there were none?
You actually see very faint of the fragments that were actually in her hair. Again, I can't projecting for you, but there's a very
Okay.
faint, small fragment here.
Yeah.
And then up here.
Okay, yep.
Those are those fragments.
Yep, okay, so that will diagram those particular fragments.
Yes.
So they were actually on the outside, not on the inside, they were just in the hair.
Correct.
So that's how they showed up on this?
Yes.
Okay. Doctor, after conducting your examination, what did you determine the cause and manner of death to be?
This is page 2 of my report. So the cause of death were gunshot wounds to head, perforating skull and brain.
In the manner?
The manner of death was homicide, shot by another person or persons by firearm arms.
Was there any other thing you noticed, any other contributing illnesses, anything else that could have caused her death?
No.
All right, was she basically healthy other than the wounds that she suffered?
Yes, no natural diseases indicated at autopsy.
All right. No further questions?
Cross-examination?
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good morning, I'm sorry, it's
Oh,
still
it is
morning.
good morning. Morning.
It's still morning. All right, Dr. Perkins, I want to talk to you about those, what you mentioned, bruises on the right forearm and the left forearm.
Yes.
You mentioned that they potentially occurred at or around the time of the shooting based upon the color of the bruises.
No, I can't tell the exact timing. It's possible that they occurred around that time, though.
So it is possible, but you can't say when exactly those occurred.
Correct.
Okay. And using the color of bruising to determine the timing of it is not an exact science, is it?
No.
Okay, all right. And those bruises, those could have occurred simply just from someone falling to the ground.
Yes.
Okay. With regard to the gunshots, I think what you told Mr. Terry, I gave him an extra degree. What you told Mr. Terry is that you cannot tell the sequence of the gunshots.
Correct.
Meaning you cannot tell us which of the wounds occurred first.
Correct.
In your autopsy report, you number the wounds 1, 2, 3, 4, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
But those numbers have nothing to do with, again, the order in which they were sustained.
No, I simply do a top to bottom ordering of my wounds.
There's nothing about this case that can give you that determination of which wound occurred first.
No.
During your preliminary examination of the body, is it also customary that you and or technicians with the medical examiner's office will take certain swabs from the body?
Yes.
Does this include swabs from intimate areas such as from the vagina?
Yes.
And are these swabs then given to law enforcement so that they can send them for further testing?
Yes.
Do you also have access to the clothing of the decedent to inspect or to look at?
In this case, yes.
Okay. You mentioned when you were talking about close range gunshot wounds and stippling and soot that if there is sort of a barrier such as clothing, that can prevent any sort of stippling on the skin, correct?
Yes.
However, if you have the clothing, you have the ability to inspect it to determine whether there's any sort of soot or any evidence of gunpowder on that clothing.
Yes, I'll do visual inspection, but any other further testing is done by law enforcement and crime scene.
Sure. And again, that clothing in this case was available to you.
Yes.
And was, when you were done inspecting it or doing whatever you needed to, provided to law enforcement.
Yes.
You mentioned a number of wounds, but in total, I think it's 4 gunshot wounds and 4 associated exits.
Yes.
3 of those gunshot wounds occur on the left side of the body.
Correct.
There is only 1 gunshot wound to the right side.
Correct.
And is that the gunshot wound to the cheek?
Yes.
Okay. And that is a wound that would have immediately incapacitated the victim.
Yes.
Meaning she would not have been able to move around after sustaining that wound to the right side of her body.
Correct.
When you were speaking with Mr. Terry about the wound to, I believe that either the left shoulder or the left back, do you recall what I'm referring to?
Yes.
He gave you an example, a position, and asked you, is it possible that the decedent could have been in a certain position? Do you recall that line of questioning?
Yes.
You by no means can say that that is the position she was in.
Correct.
All we could do is, I can stand up here all day long and give you different scenarios, and you can tell me possible or not possible.
Yes, there are a number of positions.
But there is nothing about that wound, nothing about this case that you've reviewed that can give you the position of the decedent in any of these shots.
No.
All you could basically do is tell us where the muzzle of the gun was in relation to the decedent's body.
That's correct.
That wound associated with the left shoulder or towards the back of the left side of the body, you said you did not observe any gunpowder or soot or stippling.
No.
But again, that is an area that would have potentially been covered by the clothing of the decedent?
Yes.
And you had that to inspect?
Yes.
There was an associated exit wound with that gunshot wound, correct?
Yes.
And can you remind us again, where was that exit wound?
That was on the right side of her back.
You're able to follow the path that the projectile took through the body, correct?
Yes.
And so it's moving essentially from left side of the body to the right side.
Correct.
There is no projectile or no projectile fragments located within that path.
Not with that wound.
Okay, so that means the projectile would have exited the body of the decedent.
Yes.
And that wound that we're discussing, the one to the back, that is the only wound that would not have rendered the decedent immediately incapacitated.
Correct.
Mr. Terry asked you about a wound that had an exit, I think, to the back of the neck, correct?
Yes.
And that he asked you a question of whether the muzzle would have been right in front of the decedent's face.
Yes.
Okay. You cannot tell us whether or not the decedent was conscious at the time that she sustained that wound, can you?
No.
Okay. Can I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
That wound to the back, Dr. Perkins, is that the only wound that did not hit any sort of major arteries or other organs of the body?
No, it did not. It hit skin and some superficial muscles of the body.
So that would not have been, that's the only non-fatal wound?
Correct.
Okay. Just a moment, please. Let me make sure I've got everything. Okay, I don't have anything else. Thank you, Dr. Perkins.
Yes, sir. Doctor, that going back to that wound in the back part of the body.
Yes.
That wound travels almost the full length of her back through her body, correct?
Yes.
All right. And so when a projectile enters the body, does it often lose velocity?
Yes, it does.
In fact, don't you often find projectiles in the body themselves?
Yes.
Objection to leading.
Do you often find projectiles in the body themselves?
Yes, we have penetrating gunshot wounds, which are when the bullet does not exit the body.
So if a bullet goes into the body, the minute as it's traveling through the body, does it start to continue to lose velocity the farther into the body it goes?
Yes.
And in this instance, we have some projectiles that are recovered very near where the victim's body was recovered. If those projectiles had gone through the head, could it be possible that they were just dropped right there because they had lost all their velocity to go any farther?
That's possible.
Okay. And so, for instance, the one that goes through the back, as it comes out, could it have lost most of its velocity by the time it exits the back?
Objection, Your Honor, beyond this witness's scope.
Sustained.
Judge, she's an expert, I can ask her. Is it possible that it would have lost velocity by that?
Can we approach?
If you could describe that wound to the back, what area, what muscles it went through, how long, how the length of the muscle that it went through, and what it had to go through before it exited the body?
Yes, so this wound, this is referring to page 7 of my report, enters on the left side of the back and perforates into the subcutis, so that's the tissue just deep to the skin, and goes through the left side into the right side of the, what we call the right scapular region of the back, so just above your shoulder blade, and that's where it exits the body. So it goes through the skin and the subcutis soft tissue, and then very superficially perforates some of the musculature in the back.
Some of the muscles that it goes through. Okay, and then it has to exit out the body through skin again.
Yes.
So it goes, the bullet enters through skin and has to exit through that same skin.
Yes.
All right. And again, is it, going back to that wound, that back wound, when we were discussing it, and Ms. Dunker got up and said there's all sorts of unlimited possibilities, but the one I had suggested was, if she is seated in the back seat of a vehicle and someone from the front seat turns around to shoot her, and she sees that and ducks down, would that be consistent or possible for that bullet to have entered and left an exit at that particular location?
That is possible.
All right, thanks. Nothing further, Judge.
All right. May this witness be excused?
She may, Your Honor.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's a good time to take our lunch break, so I would ask that you be back at 1:15 for being recessed.